Hi, everyone. My name is Alice. I'm from House of ZK. I'm joined here with Zac, who is co-founder of Aztec. Very excited to be chatting with you today, Zac. Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if you can speak a bit about the origin story behind Aztec.
Yeah, the origin story. Well, it's a long one. Let's see if I can try and condense it. So I was studying Web3 8 years ago. Uh, back when 2017, um, ICOs were all the rage, and me and a friend of mine started a startup to do originally TradFi on Ethereum. So it was a very kind of conservative application, syndicated loans, mid-market corporate debt, basically trying to do some real-world assets, bringing them onto Ethereum, using the properties of decentralization and trustlessness to help coordinate actors in the real world that didn't trust each other. Uh, and we realized pretty quickly that privacy was going to be a rather big problem for what we're doing, because if you want to work in the real world, in a regulated space, uh, well, you can't just splash everything all over the internet. And I remember being shocked in 2017 that like not that many people were working on this problem. You had Zcash, the OG pioneers, but outside of them, not a huge amount. Uh, so I started working on it because it was important for us at the time. Um, and then I started learning about zero-knowledge cryptography, doing some research, meeting some brilliant researchers, and I basically got, I guess you could say, ZK pilled. The understanding what you could do, the world you could build if you had, like the ability to, um, like to work over private data, encrypted data in a distributed transaction network, but still like be able to prove things about that data. It blew my mind. I didn't realize it was possible. So that was the start of basically us pivoting to Aztec and going, okay, we're going to build privacy infrastructure for Web3.
Nice, nice. And it's really great how you first started kind of building those real world applications, focusing on TradFi, and then seeing that need to have privacy and then really honing in on that. So that all sounds great. Very curious to hear about what you believe are the current main challenges surrounding ZK right now. How come we haven't seen greater mainstream adoption as of yet? I mean, we have seen a lot of improvements in terms of like proving costs, proving speeds. But what are some maybe some reasons why we haven't seen that greater adoption as of yet? What are some gaps currently in the industry?
I think a large part of it is complexity and performance, um, because there's two sides of ZK. You can use ZK for scaling, and you can use ZK for privacy. And most of the attention has been on scaling in the past few years, because I would argue that's an easier problem to solve, and it's one with less maybe it's considered lower risk. Uh, but when you want to use ZK for privacy, then you're making your proofs locally on your local hardware, or you leak secrets, and you can't rely on centralized compute clusters, which basically means you cannot gain performance through scale anymore. You have to gain performance through algorithmic improvements, through actually improving the quality of your ZK cryptography. It's a bit like, imagine how AI would develop if GPU technology was like relatively stagnant for 10 years. Because that's, when it comes to hardware requirements, it's kind of what we're at with client-side ZK. And yeah, you have to basically, if you want to add privacy into a blockchain, you really need to think from the ground up and reconfigure the entire like architecture of your blockchain, because now you're working over encrypted data, which means that the state model that you use for something like Ethereum just doesn't work anymore. And how do you interface with the encrypted world and the transparent world? Because some protocols need transparency. There are some limitations, which mean that if you want things like shared state, you might need to do that publicly. And solving all these problems basically requires innovation on a huge number of verticals. It's not just about building a better proving system. It's building a proving system that's tailored towards specific needs, low resource. But then you have to build an entire blockchain architected transaction protocol. And if you're like Aztec and doing an AL2, something we were surprised by is we had to figure out a lot of decentralization problems, because pretty much almost all L2s aren't really decentralized. And for a network like Aztec, it's essential. So yeah, just a lot of complexity needs to be handled.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that when you were first addressing that privacy problem, ZK was a kind of solution towards it. But are there any other types of cryptographic primitives that you think could be especially promising within the privacy landscape?
Cryptographic primitives, I guess. Yeah, so the main ones are, there's FHE, And then there's this, well, I wouldn't call it cryptography, but trusted execution environments. Basically, you have some trusted hardware where it's not supposed to be able to leak information, and you do the compute on the trusted hardware. Both of these, I think, have problems that prevent their wholesale adoption in the near term. With FHE, the performance is very full. The sheer complexity of FHE right now means that it's kind of where ZK was, I would say, eight years ago. And you also have some kind of systemic problems with FHE that also shared by ZK, but not so much. Things like so with FHE, the idea is you can encrypt the data and then some third party can run your computation on your encrypted data, but then you still need to decrypt that data. And so that's a challenge. Being able to prove that the third parties actually run the computation is hard, because that sort of requires putting the FHE environment wrapping that in ZK, and ZK can't prove FHE. It's not, no one knows it does. And so I think that it's, I'm very bullish on FHE long term, but I think it needs many more years in the oven. A lot of people grinding away at the state of the art. With TEs, I think they're going to form part of the solution. Where TEs are very poor is holding secrets long term, because trusted execution environments aren't really that trusted. As in, they're notorious for being constantly broken. Because taking an architecture like x86, which has almost like 50 years of backwards compatibility and enormous amount of complexity, and being able to create a system where you just simply cannot get that silicon to expose any information, well, I don't think that's ever going to be possible. There's always going to be some kind of leaks, some kind of breaks. And I think long-term secret storage, very, very dangerous. Short-term secret storage, that's pretty good. So if you want to do something like a trade matching system, where you're holding prices over a short time frame, or maybe you're using it to construct a zero knowledge proof, so that you have some secret information in that enclave while you're making your proof. I think those things are really powerful uses of TEs, and so I think they're going to be a very important part of the privacy landscape in the future. But they're not going to be a whole system solution.
Got it. So for TEs, you see them more as like a short-term solution.
No, I don't see them short term. I see them as a force multiplier, and they're useful in some contexts. They're useful if you want to store secrets short term. So if you want to make proofs, so if you want to say within a system like Aztec, if you need to make an Aztec proof using the client side, it's going to be a long time before the performance of that reaches Web 2 UX standards of it's less than a second to do a transaction. So you may want to delegate that to a third party. But how do you do that without leaking information? Well, that third party, if it's a TE, that's fine. You can trust a TE to hold your secrets for 30 seconds.
Right.
Unless, I don't know, you're a government, so someone is willing to burn a zero-day exploit for that information. I think they're useful for, you can rely on them to do certain kinds of Oracle services. So I think there are some verticals where TEs aren't just a sort of solution, they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to actually securing a user's privacy, as in storing their secret information long term, I don't think they're ever going to be an acceptable solution.
Got it. So different contexts, it would be suitable for different areas. Got it. And I wanted to also ask you about how Aztec is specifically addressing the developer experience. So when we were talking about ZK challenges, mentioned that one big portion is addressing those complexities.
Yeah.
And a lot of ZK projects are really focused on making that developer experience as accessible as possible. And wondering for Aztec side, what was the intention in developing your own ZK DSL? How does this compare to other circuit building languages or higher up the abstraction layers with ZK VMs? So
there's two kinds of, if you want to program a ZK, right, there's two avenues you can go through. There's the DSL route. Well, okay, there's you just wire your own circuits directly. I used to do that. That's not scalable. Then there's, you make a DSL, so you make a programming language that will compile to zero knowledge type, that will construct a ZK verification key for a circuit. Or you use a virtual machine. So the virtual machine example, take RISC-0. The idea is you can take any program, compile it to the RISC-V architecture, which is portable universal, and then they have one ZK circuit that will simulate a RISC-V virtual machine and run your program for you. So that provides an abstraction layer, which is possibly the easiest to use, but it comes with a lot of I would argue, complexities and costs. No abstraction layer is free, and the cost is performance and memory consumption. You really need like a third-party compute cluster to make those so complicated transactions. Um, and the memory consumptions means like phones not really possible. So if you want to do privacy, if you want ZK for privacy, I don't think right now VMs are performant enough. They're too memory hungry. They're too resource hungry. The more efficient solution is to like express your program in a way that's relatively idiomatic, quite natural for a programmer, but then use the compiler to compile that directly into constraints in a cryptographic proving system, which is what Aztec does. It's what Noir does. This allows us to construct circuits that can be proven locally with a relatively high complexity. And in my opinion, it's kind of it's a compromise in the trade-off space, where the writing Noir is, I would argue, it's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. It's Rust-like, but it's not as easy as just compiling your existing programs. Right? You still got to learn your programming language. So this is quite a long answer. For a network like Aztec, we don't really mind that trade-off, because for the same reasons why most like why Ethereum uses Solidity, why smart contracts don't seem to benefit that much from using existing programming languages, it's because the execution environment is radically different. With a normal computer program, the costs of bugs and errors aren't particularly high. With a smart contract language, you lose a lot of money, like the recent Bybit attack. And the actual like state model of what you're working with changes as well. So with a network like Aztec, you're working over encrypted data. You have these like things called nullifiers. Your state model is a bit like Bitcoin with unspent transaction objects. It's complicated, and it's complicated because of the privacy aspect. And so we wanted a DSL that we had designed from scratch to provide abstraction layers that simplify this complexity. If you're using existing programming languages, you don't get that. You've got to write your own wrapper around the programming language, and then the more complicated your wrapper, the less your language really looks like the original programming language. So for us, it was a no-brainer to do our own DSL.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, and it's really great that you guys have optimized for that trade-off. And then at the same time, even though devs have to learn a new language, but at the same time it is Rust-like, so it's not like completely foreign. So I
Exactly.
think that's really great. And in terms of use cases, are there any particular use cases for ZK, or like on the privacy side or beyond the privacy side, that you're particularly excited about?
Oh yes, many. So where to start? I think distributed identity is the main one. People have been talking about it for a long time. Ever since I was in crypto in 2017, people are like, identity protocols, great, but you need privacy for that, unless without splashing information on you. So things like ZK Passport, where you can prove you have a digital signature, like a signed signature from a passport, prove your citizenship, prove your age, extremely important. Longer term, for being able to tap into real assets, to add compliance like capabilities into DeFi, to allow DeFi to compete with CeFi. Then there's things like ZK email, where you can prove email provenance. I can prove I received an email from a certain assigned authority. So, for example, I can prove I have a Twitter account, or I can prove I received a payment. If I get an email confirmation, I can prove I possess an account for His Majesty's Revenue Collection Service, which means I'm a UK taxpayer. We're seeing the seeds of this. Like these techniques themselves are not useful in a vacuum. They're only useful if you build more complicated products and systems which require this kind of identity or compliance. But we're seeing those coming into the world now. They're being built with Aztec. They're being, like, for example, private securities tokens, or peer-to-peer real-world payments using Europe's open banking API. Again, so I think that is also extremely important. I think a lot of people say that crypto doesn't have product market fit. That's really not true. Americans say crypto does not have product market fit because Americans don't see the most valuable use case of crypto, which is access to the United States dollar. But the thing is, like, being able to actually create real payment systems that are accepted not just within a Web3 bubble or within niche developing economies, but actually like proper payment rails that can be used on the internet and Web2 in the real world. That requires strong privacy guarantees. That requires that users aren't revealing who they are or what they're spending their money on to the entire world whenever they transact on that network. And again, those systems are being built with Aztec, and that really excites me.
And it's really exciting that these use cases can extend beyond Web3 into, say, like real payment systems. So
Yeah.
all of these privacy-based applications can apply in basically anywhere in our lives, which I find really exciting. Yeah, nice. And I'm wondering, compared to when you first got into the space, what kinds of new opportunities or new kinds of challenges are we dealing with? Do you have any predictions for how the space will evolve in the next few years?
Yeah, I think the opportunity challenges. So, okay, I have some optimistic and pessimistic takes on that. I think that the pessimistic takes, because I think that the design space of what you can do with a smart contract has not changed in many years. And so we've not seen a huge explosion of innovation. You know, you had the ICO wave, you had DeFi, then you had NFTs. But a lot of the innovation recently has been more about scaling the transaction layer. So doing all of that, but just faster and with more volume and more deal flow, which is important for sure. But I think like the original OT challenge is basically making this useful to the real world. But in terms of like more tactical observations, you know, I am surprised and disappointed really that the regulatory landscape has not evolved very much over the last 8 years. You know, we've gone from a place of ignorance on the part of regulators to open hostility, back down to this kind of like weird gray area, I would say, with the rise of Donald Trump. You know, with the Biden administration, they were very anti-crypto, which I think in many ways is a good thing. It means crypto is succeeding because it was threatening existing financial elites and financial companies. That's why they were doing it. But with Trump, they're not. I'm skeptical that they are going to create a useful regulatory environment for crypto. You know, and by that I mean like understanding what decentralization is, making a place for non-custodial wallets and applications. I think that it's basically going to be a gray area where anything goes. And I think a large part of this is because why is Trump pro-crypto? It's because he's going to make a lot of money in crypto. There is nothing more to it than that, in my opinion, other than some of his base like Bitcoin. But there's no real pressure in America from any meaningful faction to provide high quality regulation. And I think the rest of the world is also just oblivious. You know, I think Europe is going to. I think the problem with Europe is that there's a lot of technology consumers and very few technology producers, which means that there's an incentive for politicians to overregulate and not be pro-innovation. So I don't see anything good coming out of the EU. The UK is very just oblivious that my government would benefit greatly from being pro-crypto. But it's not an ideological divide. It's just that their attention span is limited and their capacity to actually execute on these challenging verticals that they don't understand fully is very limited. So maybe we'll see some advancements in the developing world from if there's any or like not just the developing world but other regimes in the world that want to take a chance, you know, at incubating something really profoundly disruptive and foundational. But I think the challenge is basically just getting buy-in from the mainstream that this is a useful technology. It's not just degenerate gambling. That this can be used for real-world systems that add a lot of value, that create a lot of jobs, that create a lot of innovation. And you know, Aztec, we want to play a piece in that, but that's going to be an uphill challenge.
And it's really great that you brought up the challenge with how stagnant the regulatory landscape has been. I mean, everyone is very focused on building the tech, but we also have to consider these other factors that may hinder our progress. So hopefully we can see some new developments happening in the next few years. We'll see. But just as like a last question before we wrap up here, I'm wondering what can we expect from Aztec in the near future? And maybe you can talk about if the vision has evolved over time.
Yeah, well, in the near future, you can expect our testnet, and then you know, we want to ship the actual thing, the real deal, by the end of the year. No guarantees, but that's the goal. Has the vision changed much over the years? I think the core vision hasn't changed at all. You know, ever since 2018, when I was messing around researching zero-knowledge proofs, the whole what we wanted to do was basically at the time, the way I described it was customizable business logic and then like composable business logic. But basically, you know, like you know, being able to define basic things about transaction, like logical terms and conditions that make it that are required for the transaction to proceed. Basically, which programmability. So from 2019, it was always like programmable private smart contracts. That's what we want to do, and that's been the focus, and we've just been grinding towards it. I think that's. Yeah, I think in 2018, 2019, one major change was we realized we had to do it as a rollup because the base layer wasn't going to scale enough. But no, other than that, it's been pretty consistent. Private programmability.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Zac, for joining us here today. I really enjoyed hearing about what Aztec is doing with the privacy-preserving applications and your guys' focus there. So really appreciate you for chatting with me today.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Yeah, thank you. Our coverage at NOIRCON. Really incredible to see all of the tremendous strides that the Aztec team is making, as well as all the other teams from the interviews we had today. Really, we're in such a great time to be able to see this transition from theory and research to building real applications, especially within privacy preserving applications. But until then, we'll see you next time.